Harlem, winter night, 1934, Lenox Avenue, 2:14 a.m. Snowflakes fell like quiet judgment over a city that never slept. Inside the narrow hallway of a brownstone lit only by a flickering bulb, a man stood with a trembling hand on a revolver. He wasn't alone. Across the street, engines idled low, 3 cars, doors half open, men stepping out one by one. Fedoras low. Coats heavy. 40 of them sent into Harlem like wolves crossing a line that wasn't theirs. The first gunshot wasn't fired yet. But the smell of wet pavement, cold gunmetal, and fear was already in the air, thick as cigar smoke in a speakeasy basement. A voice whispered behind him. "They say Dutch sent everyone he had tonight." Another voice replied, calm like a blade resting on the table. "Good. Let him come." The man holding that calm was Ellsworth, Bumpy Johnson, tall, sharp suit, eyes like polished obsidian. Beside him, a woman whose presence could freeze men mid-sentence. Stephanie St. Clair, the queen of Harlem Numbers. Gold rings, emerald eyes, a voice that could politely bless a child or order a funeral. And outside, Dutch Schultz wanted Harlem. Every penny, every number slip, every alley. He believed guns would make the streets kneel. He believed Harlem would bow like the others had. He didn't know this night would rewrite Harlem's history. Oh, we'll get to that. But first, the hallway. The creak of floorboards. The click-clack of shotguns being racked downstairs. Bumpy inhaled slow, steady. The cold barrel kissed his palm like an old friend. His heartbeat didn't run, it marched. Stephanie turned her chin slightly, her perfume, cognac and danger, hanging in the stillness. "When the lights go out," she whispered, "you fire first." Before he could answer, the entire building went black. Darkness swallowed everything. Not silence, breathing, heavy boots, the metallic slide of guns finding aim. Somebody outside shouted, "Take St. Clair alive, the boy dies." They kicked the door. Wood splintered, glass rained like sharp snow across the floor. Gunfire ripped through wallpaper, turning calm into chaos. Bumpy dropped low, rolled behind a table and fired twice. One scream, then another. Footsteps thundered up the staircase like a stampede. And in that split second something happened. Something Bumpy couldn't understand yet, something that would change the war entirely. We'll return to that moment later. Because this ambush wasn't the beginning. No, this was merely the night Harlem answered back. To know why 40 armed white gangsters crossed the river thinking they owned Harlem streets, we need to rewind. Before the gunfire. Before the bodies. Before the whispers that a storm is coming for Dutch Schultz. Back when Harlem was alive with jazz, money, secrets, and one woman ruled the numbers like a queen on marble throne. But remember the moment in the dark, the part we skipped. It will matter soon. For now, picture this. Harlem days before the war, smoky jazz clubs, dice bouncing off wooden tables, men in tailored suits leaning close to whisper deals. Laughter rising but always with one eye watching the door. Bills folded neatly into pockets. Number slips passed hand to hand like tiny promises. And at the top stood Madame Queen, Stephanie St. Clair. No one spoke her name lightly. She owned territory, police respect and loyalty bought not just with money, but dignity. In a world ready to crush black ambition, she built an empire brick by brick. Then Dutch Schultz turned his gaze toward Harlem, eyes hungry, greedy, certain he could take what centuries hadn't given. He underestimated 2 people, a woman who would not kneel, and a young man who would become legend. But Dutch had something they didn't, political friends, corrupt cops, and a river of blood ready to flow if Harlem resisted. This is where our story truly begins, not on the night of gunfire but the calm before it. Where every handshake was a gamble, every smile hid a warning, and fate was writing Harlem's most violent chapter. The war for Harlem was coming, and nobody knew who would survive it. To understand why Harlem burned in the 1930s, you must walk its streets before the first bullet flew. Daytime Harlem was a different creature from the Harlem of ambushes and shadowed staircases. The sun lit up brownstones, street vendors shouted over each other, kids played stickball in alleyways. On corners stood smartly dressed men, runners, sliding folded papers into waiting hands. Women in fur coats and flapper dresses counted coin rolls behind cigar smoke. Jazz floated out of windows like perfume. Money moved quietly and fast. And presiding over this humming city of dreams was Stephanie St. Clair, Madame Queen. Not born into power. Not given anything. She took it. Her office was on 140th Street, glass desk, velvet curtains, silver ashtray always warm from a burning cigarillo. Behind her chair hung a framed motto she lived by. Dignity is not requested, It is demanded. Police knew her. Politicians respected her. Men twice her size spoke softly in her presence. But even queens bleed when empires get hungry. Enter Arthur Flegenheimer, Dutch Schultz. Bootlegger. Extortion king. A man who smiled with his mouth but never his eyes. He saw Harlem like he saw everything. A business waiting to be owned. Numbers racket equals cash. Cash equals power. Power equals immortality. Dutch didn't care that Harlem belonged to the black community. He didn't care that Stephanie built her empire from nothing but grit and brilliance. He only cared about profit. And he decided he would take it, or burn the streets trying. At first it was quiet. Dutch sent messengers, slick young men in tailored suits offering partnership. A polite threat wrapped in velvet. Stephanie listened, exhaled smoke and said two cold words. No deals. This is the moment that will matter soon, remember it? Because Dutch Schultz didn't accept no. Not from other gangsters. Not from judges. And certainly not from a black woman. He returned the next week, this time not with a smile but with guns. Shops that ran numbers for St. Clair got bricks through windows. Collectors disappeared. A runner was found in an alley, neck broken, numbers slips scattered like confetti over fresh snow. Harlem whispered, war is coming. But St. Clair was not afraid. She sent letters to the press accusing police of corruption. She bought judges. She bribed, pushed, threatened, held her kingdom like a lioness defending cubs. Yet she knew intelligence alone wouldn't win this fight. She needed muscle. Not just any muscle, someone with loyalty carved into bone. Someone who could smile while holding a knife and not blink when blood hit the floor. That's when she turned to a man recently released from prison. A man who moved like he belonged in the shadows, who read people like books, who could talk with charm or kill with silence. Ellsworth, Bumpy Johnson. Their first meeting was not warm. He walked into her office smelling like rain and old stone, hat in hand, eyes razor sharp. Stephanie didn't stand to greet him. She watched him like a queen judges a knight claiming allegiance. I hear you want work, she said. Bumpy nodded once. I hear you have enemies. No smiles. Just understanding. She poured 2 glasses of cognac, amber like firelight. The taste burned his throat, but the moment burned itself deeper. She slid a folder across the desk. Photos. Names. Addresses. Dutch thinks he owns Harlem. Bumpy picked up the glass again, rolled it slowly. Then we remind him who does. In the streets, people could feel the pressure building. Jazz sounded sharper, doors locked earlier, every shadow felt like an eye watching. A new rule appeared like a ghost passing through Harlem. Walk fast. Talk low. Trust no one. Because Dutch wasn't planning a negotiation. He was planning a takeover. One that would start with bribes, continue with bombs, and end with blood. What nobody knew, not Dutch, not even Stephanie, was how deep this war would cut Harlem's heart. But the first strike was coming. And when it came, it wouldn't be subtle. War doesn't announce itself with fanfare, it whispers first. A rumor here. A missing man there. A glance exchanged too long across a bar. Then one night, the whisper became a scream. It was late, fog crawling low like a living thing. A storefront runner named Red Tommy stepped out of a numbers spot on 127th, pockets full of slips and cash. He lit a cigarette. Match flared orange against dark. A car rolled slow beside him. Windows black. No plates. Tommy squinted, smoke hanging from his lip. You lost? He asked. The door opened. 2 men stepped out, coats swelling with hidden iron. No words. Just the metallic cough of a gun. 3 shots. Tommy fell backwards, cigarette still burning between fingers that would never move again. Blood pooled into the gutter, mixing with rainwater, running toward the sewer like Harlem itself was swallowing him whole. By morning the message was clear. Dutch had officially stepped into Harlem. The city reacted like a body sensing poison. Doors shut early. Gun sellers tripled their prices. Barbershops buzzed with more fear than clippers. But Bumpy? He walked these streets with his hat low, his pace unhurried, like he already knew how this war would end. He visited Tommy's mother that afternoon, brought money, spoke gently, promised justice. She cried into his coat, clutching his sleeve like a lifeline. As he walked away, something inside Bumpy hardened, not rage, not grief exactly, but purpose. This detail will matter soon. Dutch Schultz wasn't subtle. He wanted Harlem fast. He flooded corners with his own runners, pale faces trying to sell hope on streets that didn't trust them. They offered better payouts, 10% more, 20% more. Some storefronts caved. Others hesitated. Stephanie did not. She doubled her payouts, raised her runners' salaries, paid for sick mothers' funeral costs. She fought with dignity as her weapon. But Dutch fought with bullets. And bullets draw men like Bumpy. One evening in Stephanie's office, tension thick as whiskey fumes, she pointed to a map full of red pins. "These are his new spots," she said. Bumpy leaned over, eyes calculating. "Leave Orchard Street to me." Stephanie raised a brow. "That one has guards." Bumpy tapped the map lightly, 3 times, slow, deliberate. "Not for long." Later that night, Orchard Street glowed under street lamps like a stage waiting for performers. 2 of Dutch's men stood outside a shop door, smoking, laughing too loud, confident. Bumpy approached alone. Hat shadowed his face, steps soft as piano keys. He didn't draw a gun. Not yet. One guard squinted. "You lost, friend?" Bumpy smiled without showing teeth. "No. But you're about to be." The second guard chuckled, but his hand drifted toward his belt. Too slow. Bumpy moved like liquid violence. 1 punch to the throat, a knee to the ribs. First man collapsed wheezing. Second tried to draw, gun halfway up when Bumpy twisted his wrist and the alley echoed with bones snapping like dry wood. No gunshots. Just silence and pain. Bumpy pocketed their gun, knocked once on the shop's back door. The runner inside opened, eyes wide when he saw who stood there. "Tell Madame Queen Orchard is ours again." Harlem talked that night, whispered in bars, in kitchens, in smoky jazz clubs. A name began circulating like currency. Bumpy. He's Stephanie's man. He ain't afraid of Dutch. The more Dutch pushed, the more Harlem lifted its chin. But Dutch wasn't done. He was offended. And an offended gangster is a storm looking for a street to destroy. He gathered his lieutenants, slammed his fist on a table, whiskey sloshing. "I'm sending 40 men into Harlem. I want St. Clair begging by the week's end. 40 men. Armored cars. Tommy guns. A takeover by force." Nobody, not even Bumpy, knew how deadly this was about to get. But someone else did. Someone watching from the shadows. Someone preparing to betray, to flip sides when the bloodshed peaked. We'll return to him later. For now, Harlem tightened its jaw. Guns were cleaned. Allies chosen. Jazz clubs lowered their lights. Because when 40 men cross the bridge into Harlem, they don't come for peace. They come for war. Harlem didn't sleep the night Dutch Schultz made his move. People felt it, like thunder rolling beneath the pavement. Street cats vanished, doors bolted, bartenders served their last drink with eyes on the entrance. Even the jazz changed, slower, darker, like horns were mourning something not dead yet. At 11:32 p.m., headlights cut through the river fog. One car. Then another. Then another. Until 40 armed men crossed into Harlem in a convoy, trench coats, Tommy guns, cold intent. They spread like termites into the district, hitting number spots, shaking down storefronts, firing shots into ceilings. Paper slips scattered in wind. People hid behind curtains. Dutch wanted panic and he got it. But Bumpy Johnson was already waiting. Hours earlier, in a dim-lit backroom thick with cigar smoke, Bumpy stood over a table of maps, bullets, whiskey glasses half full. Men watched him not as a follower, but as someone becoming necessary. Stephanie sat across from him, emerald earrings shining like tiny daggers. "Dutch will come tonight." Bumpy nodded once. "Let him. Harlem's going to answer." She leaned forward, voice low like velvet over steel. "No retreat." He held her gaze for a second longer than respect required. A pact formed, not spoken but sealed in silence. Outside, rain began tapping windows like impatient fingers. This detail will matter soon, remember it. When Dutch's men hit the first number spot on 133rd, they expected fear. Instead they found Bumpy, alone, leaning on the doorway like he was waiting for a bus. The gunmen froze. One sneered, "You the boy running errands for that queen?" Bumpy didn't blink. "I'm the man she calls when boys like you forget manners." Tommy guns lifted, black mouths hungry for violence. But before a trigger could breathe, the streetlights died. The entire block went black. Not a power outage, a planned blackout. Bumpy's doing. Rain poured harder now, washing gunpowder smell into the gutter. Lightning flashed, for 1 second revealing shapes moving on rooftops and alleys behind crates. Harlem wasn't quiet. Harlem had men in place. Gunfire cracked like fireworks. Glass shattered. Dutch's soldiers scattered, unsure where the bullets came from, shooting blind. Bumpy counted the seconds between lightning. Memory sharp. Mind cold. On the next flash he moved. 2 shots. 1 scream. Boots hit wet pavement. He tackled one man into a puddle, fist slamming teeth like piano keys. Another aimed from behind, lightning flickered. Bumpy twisted, gun kicked, muzzle flash lit his eyes like a predator. He wasn't just fighting. He was sending a message. On 135th, another crew stormed a betting house. Expecting clerks, found women armed with shotguns under velvet coats. The first blast threw a man through stained glass. People would talk about that image for years. On 141st, a gunfight spilled through a jazz bar mid-song, trumpet note freezing in air as men hit the floor, whiskey spilling like blood. A piano player later swore. Bullets flew past me but the keys never stopped. Harlem wasn't bowing. Harlem was answering. But here's the twist we left waiting. Remember the night in part 1? The hallway ambush, building going dark? That wasn't Dutch's mistake. It was bait. Someone tipped Dutch off about a meeting place. Someone close enough to Stephanie to know details that shouldn't leak. The traitor. Inside her circle. We'll reveal him soon, but not yet. Because at 2:14 a.m. on Lenox Avenue, when Bumpy and Stephanie stood in that dark hallway with bootsteps rushing up the stairs, the war reached its turning point. Bumpy whispered, "King, fall back. I'll hold them." She didn't move. "No. We stand together." The door burst open like a thunderclap. Gunfire tore wallpaper into confetti. Bumpy fired back, shells clinking on hardwood. Then, and only Harlem remembers this clearly, someone shouted from downstairs. "Drop your guns, cops." But the voice wasn't police. It was Dutch's lieutenant dressed as one. Confusion split the moment. Half second. Enough. Two of Stephanie's guards hesitated, fatal hesitation. Bullets found them before regret could. Bumpy grabbed Stephanie by the arm, shoved her behind a column, and returned fire with the calm of a man born in conflict. He hit 3. Fourth lunged with a knife. Bumpy twisted, blade scraping his coat, and slammed the man down the staircase. Bodies tumbled. Gun smoke turned the hallway into a gray dream. And then silence. Only rain. Only breathing. When dawn crept across Harlem like a tired witness, 6 men lay dead in the brownstone. Word spread by noon. Bumpy stood against 40. Madam Queen still holds Harlem. Dutch failed, but he's coming back harder. People looked at Bumpy differently after that. Not as a soldier. As something larger. Dangerous. Necessary. But victory births retaliation, and Dutch was not a man to taste blood without demanding gallons more. The war wasn't over. It was just getting cruel. Dawn over Harlem was no sunrise, it was aftermath. Streets glistened not from dew, but from washed-away blood, sluiced into gutters where whispers flowed faster than water. By breakfast, every barber, grocer, bootblack, and jazzman knew. Dutch failed, and 6 of his men didn't go home. But fear didn't fade. It grew teeth. Police raided Numbers spots claiming protection, but everyone knew whose pockets they served. Dutch paid officers like altar boys take offerings, quiet, hungry, unquestioning. And so, while Harlem cheered in back rooms and raised glasses in smoky bars, Stephanie and Bumpy sat in her office with new tension between them. Victory tasted sharp, like cognac with a shard of glass inside. Stephanie leaned back, robe draped like a throne over her shoulders. "We sent them running," she said. Bumpy didn't smile. Running men come back marching. With more guns. She watched him a moment, proud but worried. He had taken the war personal. And personal wars rarely end clean. Dutch Schultz meanwhile stewed in his Manhattan suite, shirt half open, tie yanked loose like a noose ready for revenge. He slammed a decanter against the wall, amber liquid bleeding down wallpaper like whiskey tears. His men stood silent, bruised, bandaged, humiliated. Dutch pointed to one survivor, a pale, trembling thug missing 2 fingers thanks to Bumpy's blade. "One man, one, stands against us. We're the river. He's a stone. We crush stones." But even as he raged, he feared something he'd never admit. Harlem wasn't like other territories. It didn't fold. It fought back with soul, pride, and unity. Still, Dutch had a plan darker than bullets. A plan that would shift the war into something Harlem had never seen. He was going to bleed the neighborhood slowly. The next weeks became a rhythm of gunshots and funerals. Runners vanished. Stores torched. A child found a Numbers slip fluttering near a body in an alley, paper stained red, like luck had died with him. Stephanie paid families, stood graveside in black silk, face hard as marble. Bumpy attended every burial, coat collar up, hat low, eyes unblinking. He remembered each name like scripture. This detail will matter. But despite death, more men volunteered to run numbers. What? Because Harlem wasn't just defending money. It was defending ownership. Respect. A world where black men and women weren't stepping stones, they were kings and queens. Yet the war's turning point came not with a bullet, but with a betrayal. Remember the traitor we hinted at earlier? The one feeding Dutch information, meeting times, pickup spots, guard rotations? His name was Junius Junebug Carter. Smooth-talking runner, smile too wide, loyalty too cheap. Bumpy trusted him once, gave him work when he was desperate. Junebug repaid that grace by selling routes to Dutch for envelopes of cash and promises of promotion. He thought he was clever. He thought betrayal was a shortcut to power. But you cannot betray Harlem without Harlem hearing the echo. One night, Bumpy found a note slipped under his door. Few words. Written shaky like someone afraid of dying for telling truth. Junebug meets Dutch's men Thursdays at midnight, 145th Pier. Bumpy stared at the note so long the edges soaked sweat from his fingers. He told no one. Not Stephanie. Not crew. He needed proof, not suspicion. And he wanted to look the traitor in the eyes when the truth cracked open. That Thursday, fog rolled off the Hudson like a ghost breathing. Bumpy stood in the shadows of the pier, coat heavy with rain, fingers tapping the gun under his arm. Midnight. Footsteps. Shifting silhouettes. Junebug emerged, laughing with two white thugs, pockets bulging with bribe money. He passed them a ledger. A list of St. Clair's bankers and safe houses. That one list could kill dozens. Bumpy stepped from the dark. Junebug froze. Eyes wide. Face drained to ash. Bumpy, I was gonna tell you. Bumpy raised a gloved hand. Silence fell like snow. You had Harlem. You traded it for silver. Junebug trembled, voice cracking. It was just business. Bumpy stepped closer, rain dripping off his hat brim like seconds ticking down. Harlem ain't business. It's family. The two thugs reached for weapons, too slow. 3 shots. Bodies splashed into river water, sinking like forgotten promises. Junebug fell to his knees, sobbing, begging. Bumpy stared down at him, heartbreak visible only in the way his jaw tightened. You betrayed your people. One final shot. Quiet. Personal. The river swallowed him. Only moonlight witnessed. Next morning, Harlem whispered again. Bumpy cleaned the traitor. St. Clair runs the kingdom tighter. Dutch is losing men, losing streets, but he ain't done. Because Dutch wasn't planning to retreat, he was planning one last strike. Bigger. Crueler. Designed to break spirits, not just bones. And the next move he made would test Bumpy more deeply than any bullet ever could. One that would put Harlem's soul, and a child, in the center of hell. Dutch Schultz, bleeding pride more than money, prepared a move that wasn't business. It was personal cruelty. He wanted Harlem to scream. He wanted Stephanie St. Clair to kneel. He wanted Bumpy Johnson broken. And in that twisted mind he found a way. One rainy evening, a young boy, maybe 10, a numbers runner everyone called Little Ray, disappeared. Ray ran slips for Stephanie, loved jazz, dreamed of buying his mama a new winter coat. Harmless kid. Bright grin. Too brave for the streets. Days passed with no word. Mothers whispered prayers, men cursed under breath. Stephanie closed her office doors, not for fear but fury. A child was sacred ground. Then a message arrived. Not written. Delivered. 2 of Dutch's men dropped Little Ray's cap at the steps of a Harlem church, bullet hole through the brim, blood dried dark around it like a warning carved from sorrow. The church bell rang not for service, but because someone screamed. Bumpy heard before word spread. When he saw the cap, he didn't shout. He didn't swear. He just closed his hand around it until the leather creaked like bones. And Harlem knew, this was no longer a war. This was vengeance waiting for a trigger. Dutch hid in a hotel suite guarded like a fortress. Bodyguards everywhere, Tommy guns like extra furniture. He paced floors, believing numbers and bullets were the same currency. But fear is a debt that demands payment with interest. Bumpy gathered 12 men, not 40, not 50. Just 12 loyal enough to die with him. He didn't need numbers. He needed precision. Stephanie tried to stop him. We handle this through power and pressure, not emotion, she warned. Bumpy placed Little Ray's cap gently on her desk. She stared at it. And stiff. Eyes wet but refusing to break. Bring me Dutch, she whispered, or bring me his peace. Midnight. Rain falling like the sky wanted to wash the city clean of sin. Bumpy and his crew moved through shadows toward Dutch's hideout, the Onyx Hotel, 3rd floor, corner suite. Rumor said Dutch kept money in stacks high enough to rest his feet on. Rumor also said he slept with a gun on his chest like a child with a toy. Inside the lobby, Jazz played slow and lonely, like a trumpet knew a tragedy was walking through the door. Bumpy entered calm, coat dripping, hat low. He slid a bill to the desk clerk without eye contact. "Forget my face." The clerk looked down, and when he looked up again, Bumpy was already gone, climbing the stairwell instead of the elevator. Up one flight. 2, 3. Every step slow, deliberate, the creak underfoot like a heartbeat. At the third floor landing, 2 guards. Eyes sharp. Guns sharper. "You lost," one said. Bumpy raised his chin slightly, barely acknowledgement. "No. You are." Bullets cracked. One guard dropped. Second dove behind a column, gunfire shredding wallpaper into raining dust. But Bumpy wasn't aiming for the guard. He was aiming for the light switch. One shot, hall turned black. Dark as revenge. Muzzle flashes revealed shapes like ghosts, but Bumpy knew these hallways better than fear. 2 shots. A thud. Silence. He moved down the corridor, boots whispering over plush carpet. At the suite door he didn't knock. He kicked it open. Dutch jolted from his chair, whiskey spilling from his glass, eyes wide like a fox seeing fire. "Johnson." Bumpy stepped inside, thunder behind his voice quiet but heavy. "You sent 40 men into Harlem." "I came alone." "That tells you everything." Dutch reached for his gun, hand shaking. For the first time he wasn't in control. He was prey. "You think you can kill me and walk out alive?" Dutch spat. Bumpy took another step, rainwater dripping from his coat onto the carpet like ticking seconds. "I don't plan on walking. I plan on ending this." Dutch backed up until he hit the desk. A framed picture fell. Glass cracked, like the illusion of his power. "Harlem was never yours," Bumpy said. "You tried to take what you couldn't earn." Dutch's voice trembled. "What do you want? Money? Territory?" Bumpy leaned in close, so close Dutch felt his breath. "Respect for Harlem. And justice for a boy." Dutch froze. And in that silence, that long, terrible second, the legend was born. One final gunshot echoed through the suite. Hotel guests later claimed they heard it like thunder rolling through bone. Dutch Schultz fell, whiskey bottle rolling from his hand, life leaking across velvet like spilled ink. The city exhaled, deeply, slowly, as if Harlem itself had been holding its breath. By sunrise, every paper, every alley whisper, every bar tone carried the same truth. Bumpy Johnson stood up to the mob, and Harlem stood behind him. Dutch's empire began collapsing within days. Arrest. Power struggles. Men fled like rats from sinking luxury. Stephanie St. Clair remained queen. Bumpy became legend, not for violence alone but for loyalty, principle, and courage in a world built to crush it. Even children whispered his name like folklore. And Harlem walked taller. But history never ends on a clean page. Because while Dutch was gone, a new storm was forming downtown. A bigger name. A sharper mind. A man who didn't need 40 men to take a city, just a handshake and a smile. Lucky Luciano. And the story of how Bumpy Johnson met Lucky, not as enemies, not yet as friends, would change the entire underworld. But that is another night. Another war. Another legend. And if you think this was wild, wait till you hear what happened when Bumpy Johnson sat across from Lucky Luciano in a room where every man carried a gun, but only 2 carried a future. Main loops closed. New loop launched. If you want part 2, Lucky and Bumpy, the dinner that rewrote the Mafia, tell me. Continue the next chapter. Before you leave, if this story lived in your head like a movie, drop a comment, like the video, and subscribe so you never miss the next Harlem legend. Harlem remembers. Now you do too.